Let's start at 32, though, Drew. Let's start down at the bottom instead of starting at the top. Let's talk about the worst team going into 2019. Okay, so we had an off season, right? We had a bunch of free agency. We had a bunch of guys move on from teams. We had new guys coming in. We had a draft. Well, you don't have a choice, but you got to play for this team. Who is the worst squad in the NFL?
I mean, I don't really think there's any question of this. It's the Miami Dolphins. That's it. I mean, you're talking about a team that literally didn't do anything that makes you go, okay, they got better right there. Maybe some people can sit there and say that Josh Rosen trade made them a little bit better, but who's he going to throw to? What is his weapons around him that's going to create, okay, Josh Rosen's going to do better than he did in Arizona? Because guess what Arizona did with Josh Rosen?
Not too much.
They were the worst
team
team
lost
in the
a lot
league.
of games.
Exactly.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Dale, good to see you, man. Also, Chris says, talk about the Cowboys or he's out. I don't think you want us talking about the Cowboys at this end of the list, right? You want them to sneak up towards the top. Going back to the Dolphins here, Drew, we had them at 32 last year, and we had them at 32 going into the offseason as well. This is one of those teams that we just have had no faith in for the past couple of years. They managed to win 7 games, though. They managed to get the 13th pick in the draft. Could we see another upset like that this year? Because I look at this team, and I'm like, man, you already lost Ryan Tannehill, who, in my opinion, was the guy who made a lot of that happen last year when things shouldn't have happened. He made things happen. They got wins because of his arm, and they absolutely missed him without it. I think Josh Rosen going in there is probably not going to be better than Ryan Tannehill right out of the gate, not when you talk about these weapons around him.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, you got Ryan Fitzpatrick. Depending on how many games he does, he's going to win you a game or two. I honestly think that. Even with the depleted receiver core, even with just literally nothing on offense that goes, okay, they're good there. I would say that they can win a game or two with Ryan Fitzpatrick because he's done it in the past with teams that doesn't really excite you, and they can go off and throw 400
like Tampa
yards
Bay last year,
and 400 yards and 4 touchdowns and win you a game.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think anyone picked Tampa Bay to have that start they had last year. The first 4 games were magical for Tampa, and then you look at what happened. I mean, they kind of fell apart after that. I wonder if Tannehill can give them that 1, 2, 3 game spurt out there in Miami, but you look at the receivers there in Miami, they're just not as good. It's night and day compared to what Tampa Bay has when it comes to offensive power. Even offensive line, neither one of them are very good. They don't have anything on Miami that I'm like, yeah, they're going to be much better there than they were in Tampa Bay. So I gotta go last year, Drew. So they're not moving at all. They're going to stay at 32 for our show rankings, for my rankings. I totally agree with that. Let's talk about the next team. Who's at 31?
Ken said, well, before I go on to that, Ken says Bills or Dolphins. No faith in what the Bills have done, huh?
We're a little bit higher on them than that.
Dale says, what's your thought on the new Browns team, man?
Well, we're not talking about them at the bottom. We are going to be moving on to them. Short version, we both like them. Yeah. We both like what they did. They've made a lot of plays.
Really nice.
I guess you're going to have to stay tuned and see where they land. Let's talk about 31, though, because this isn't the Browns. It's another team that starts with a B, but it isn't the Browns.
But this was controversial. There's no doubt about it, because, here I think you could really mix about 3 teams into this spot. But what we decided to go with was the Buccaneers. I mean, literally, when you talk about a team that's trying to get better, they did a great job at hiring a head coach that I believe in, Bruce Arians, that makes, okay, they're going in the right direction. I'm thinking, yeah, just give them a good draft, and you're talking about a team that could possibly be there and make something of themselves. And you look at this draft, it's almost like a repeat of last year's draft.
This is a 7-spot drop going into the offseason with our rankings, Drew, into right now. And I kind of had them in the same spot at 31 on my rankings as well. But I think when you look at it, this is a team that's only subtracted. They had the least amount of cap space going into free agency. They didn't really add any high-dollar free agents. I think their marquee signing was Brashad Perriman from the Cleveland Browns. So no one that really lights anything up. They lost guys like Adam Humphries. They lost Deshaun Jackson. They lost even Ryan Fitzpatrick, who they needed this past couple of years. That got them a couple wins. Jameis Winston, whether it's health or suspension, has not been on the field as much as they've needed him to. And when he's there, he's not always the best option. I think Tampa Bay is the least improved team this year, and they're one of the biggest droppers, I think, on our entire board. They didn't get better anywhere. They got worse. And the only thing they did well last year was throw the ball, and then they lost multiple receivers that are really good at receiving the ball. So I wonder how they're going to actually look next year. I know everyone's going to sit there and say they tried to fix the defense in this draft, and I like Devin White, but when you lost Quan Alexander as well, you're not that much better. Not from day one. I think the Buccaneers have a lot to prove that this defense can actually be better. Like you said, I think their best addition was Bruce Arians coming in to coach this squad. I think everything else has been a step back in Tampa.
Don't get us wrong. We absolutely love Devin White. We love that pick. It absolutely made sense to fill their defense with that, except maybe passing on Josh Allen. But it's just day one starter. He's not going to be as Quan Alexander. He's not going to be that good because no rookie day one is normally as good as a starter that's been there for a few years and proving himself to be a great player.
And even if he is, how marginal of an increase is that on the defense? Like, he's not a guy that's going to come in and they're going to go from being the 31st defense in the NFL to being, 15th.
This is not as a Khalil Mack on the edge getting 20 sacks a season.
Exactly. It's not a shutdown corner. It's not a safety you can make an impact. I like Devin White. I think he's a great player, but they got to add more pieces around him before this team's going to have any kind of defensive chops.
It's a great way to start, though.
Let's talk 30. Ken hit the nail on the head here. He said the Bengals at 30. Again, no move for us. This is a team that came into the offseason for us at 30. Didn't really move up the charts at all.
This is a team that I really wanted to put at 31, but after we discussed about it, there's just too much things that the Bengals didn't change. They didn't lose a lot offensively like the Buccaneers did. I'd say both their defense are very questionable. They both lost players on the defensive side of the ball. But when you look at the Bengals offense, you look at the return of Andy Dalton, you look at the return of A.J. Green, you look at Joe Mixon and what he did last year, you look at all the other receivers that they're trying to develop around that offense. Of course, their offensive line's a little bit questionable, but their offense gives them that step above the Buccaneers. And when I say that, it's not like the Buccaneers aren't going to put up points. Jameis Winston's on a contract year. Most players play their best ball on a contract year. If you're looking for maybe a second or a third quarterback in fantasy, he might be worth picking up because he might play lights out with Bruce Arians. They're going to throw a lot. There's no doubt about it. But when you look at both these offenses, you got to give that edge to the Bengals, and that's why we put them at 30.
Absolutely. I think the Bengals do one thing very well, which is play offense. They run the ball pretty well. They try to address the offensive line, bring guys like Jonah Williams in, and then they throw the ball pretty well, too. If you look at Andy Dalton, the way he was playing before he got injured, I mean, the guy was on track for 4,000 yards. I think when you look at it, a healthy A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd coming back, maybe he can play well as well. I think the Bengals have at least one side of the ball figured out. I think their offense should be all right. The defense is going to be atrocious, but guess what? Tampa's not any better. And you can beat a team by outscoring them. I don't think you can beat a team if you're not firing on at least on the offensive side of the ball and you play terrible defense as well. So that's why I say the Bengals are significantly farther ahead of the Buccaneers in my opinion. Let's talk 29 though, Drew.
Before we move on, Ken says, Bruce pisses me off. How can you say you'll only come out of retirement for the Browns and then go to the Bucs? Well,
money, number one, and they probably told him you get
position was already taken.
Yeah, I was going to say, he might have only said that trying to lure them out, or, I don't know, maybe the Buccaneers just made him an offer he couldn't refuse. So, I get it, but you got your guy Tony Kitchens out there in Cleveland, so remember, I think if they wanted Bruce Arians, they could have had Bruce Arians. This isn't him turning you down. This is you told him no.
I also think Bruce Arians is, he's probably calling a lot more calls on the draft and free agency than he probably would have in the Browns. I'm blanking out on the.
You don't think Ken Dorsey's going to give him the reign of the
Ken Dorsey's
Cleveland
not
Browns?
really one of those guys to give up a lot of say when it comes to his players.
Let's talk about 29, though, Drew. I have the Giants at number 29, which is a 9-spot drop from our offseason rankings, man. Was it all Odell Beckham?
No.
It was Olivier Vernon, too, right?
It was a lot of depletion on that defensive side of the ball. As much as Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be completely missed on that offense, he is the one that created a lot of open space for like Sterling Shepard and
Evan Ingram.
And all them is to find places in the backfield. They're not going to find it anymore. They're not going to get it. Golden Tate comes in, but Golden Tate's a 31, 32-year-old receiver. I still like the guy. I still think he can play, but he's not Odell Beckham Jr. He's not a guy where defenses have to cheat and go to that side. So this is going to be completely fair all the way across. And Eli struggled reaching everyone in the secondary. He was throwing interceptions. He was falling down because of pressure or non-pressure. I mean,
and this isn't us sitting there reacting to Daniel Jones either. This isn't us saying, oh, they made the wrong pick at number 6 or anything like that. This is their defense fell apart. They lost guys like Olivier Vernon. They lost their safety to the Redskins, Landon Collins as well. If you look at the way this team has kind of fallen apart, I get it. They added Kevin Zeitler. They're going to be better on the offensive line, and that's fine. I think that's kind of good when you have a young quarterback. They're building on that side. They still have Saquon Barkley. Like you said, they brought in Tate to try to replace Odell Beckham. But the drop from Odell Beckham to Golden Tate, the drop this defense is going to take, I can't sit there and say they're going to have an offense that's going to compete with the Bengals, but you kind of talk me into them going ahead because Saquon Barkley's a great player. Maybe he wins an extra game or two simply because of his effort. To me, I had the Giants another spot lower than this even. I had the Bengals ahead of them, but I agree. Both of these teams are pretty close down there at the bottom.
Justin goes 29, even with that amazing number 6 pick.
We're not even reacting to that. We're assuming Eli's going to play this whole year. I mean, that's the thing. You could sit there and say Daniel Jones is the savior of this team, and maybe, he throws a little bit of a nip factor into it, but for the most part, you're looking at this like, what is Eli going to do with a worse receiver in Golden Tate?
Daniel Jones is not going to start. unless Eli gets hurt during training camp or anything like that or preseason. He's not going to start. He's not going to see the field until they've lost a few games. Even if they lose a few games, I still don't think that he's going to start him. It's a possibility he sits for a whole year, kind of like Patrick Mahomes did.
Well, Brian also said the Giants O-line can't protect Eli. But here's the thing. They're working on that. Zeitler, good offensive guard they traded for Cleveland. I know it cost them an arm and a leg to get him in Olivier Vernon, but that's okay. And then you look at them having Will Hernandez, a draft pick from last year, good guard as well. They signed
Nate Solder,
thank you, from the Patriots 2 years ago. They've put a lot of effort into fixing this offensive line. I'm not saying it's 100% fixed. We're not talking about one of the best units in football yet, but they're getting to the point now where they should be all right. Like that moniker of them being a bad offensive line it's probably about time that leaves.
Absolutely.
That might have gone from a weakness to somewhat of a strength.
Literally, when we look at this, you got to think about these ratings as what have they done on paper? Because none of these games have been played yet. No one knows this offensive line is going to click or not. But with all signs of what last year looked like, it looks like that offensive line is going to struggle. And when you look at, okay, what about weapons? What did they bring around Eli Manning that's going to make a difference? You're going to sit there and tell me Golden Tate's better than Odell Beckham Jr.? No one's going to say that. That's not true. So when you look at all these losses, and rookies are kind of hard to grade because you don't know if day one they come out and like a middle linebacker's Darius Leonard. You don't know that.
Right.
Because he can come out and be absolutely nobody. So to sit there and say the Giants are above 29, even I like the Giants. I talk highly about Eli Manning all the time, even though you give me a lot of grief about it. I cannot rank them any higher than 29.
Absolutely. Now, Henry also said, where do the Raiders rank? Don't worry, we haven't got to them yet, but they're coming up soon. And Chris says he likes where the Giants are going. He says, hail to the Redskins as well. Justin says, 14 of the last 15 top 6 picks have started an average of 10 games their first year. I agree with you. It's moving towards that trend, but I think you talk about the Giants, you're talking about one of the most conservative franchises in football. Gettleman's already said he could see this guy sitting 2 or 3 years. And I think that's a stretch. That's not going to happen.
Okay, but let's also be completely honest. A lot of these quarterbacks are not replacing a 2-time winning Super Bowl champ or quarterback. They're not. They're not doing it. They're replacing someone like I can't even think of him. I mean, literally.
I mean, you're talking about replacing guys like Jameis Winston, other guys like Marcus Mariota that are coming off the block.
Taylor.
And it hasn't happened yet, but that's on the block. Wait, the Titans and the Buccaneers. Ironically, will both be drafting quarterbacks next year as well.
I'm trying to think of whoever.
Tyrod Taylor from Buffalo.
Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about who these number one.
Josh McCown leaving from the Jets. I mean, for Sam Darnold, I get what you're saying.
This is not Eli Manning, and they're not Eli Mannings out there.
No. And as much as I dog on Eli Manning, he's still better than some of these other options are. At quarterback, usually when a guy moves in there, I think the Giants are not going to be any rush. I don't think they expect to win very much this year. Maybe they win 5 or 6 games again, but I really don't see them saying we're going to the Super Bowl if Daniel Jones pans out. All right, let's talk about 28, Drew. Let's talk about the Cardinals.
Oh, Ken said, look at what happened to Flacco. Absolutely, Ken. That's exactly my point.
Exactly. Let's talk about the Cardinals, though. This is a tough team to rank because, yes, they were down at the bottom here, Drew, but we love exactly what they did in the draft. We love their free agency as well.
I do got to fix what I'm saying. Ken, Flacco, even though he is a one-time Super Bowl champion, I still can't put that Super Bowl on him. He played great in the offseason, but...
It's kind of like I say about Eli for both of his.
Okay.
Okay. It just had an amazing defense that bailed him out against Tom Brady.
Twice.
Yeah, with an amazing defense both times. And amazing catches by some wide receivers. I think David Tyree would agree with me there. Same with Mario Manningham. Moving forward, let's talk about the Cardinals here. This is a tough team to rank. Again, they only won 3 games last year, Drew. They had the first pick in the draft. But they're changing over quarterbacks. They're changing over schemes. They have a lot of moving parts here this year. It's very possible we're talking about them being back down at 32. But we love their draft, man. I mean, they brought in Byron Murphy, great corner that's going to play opposite of Patrick Peterson. We had him as a first-round pick. They got him in the second. We like the Kyler Murray pick. They didn't mess that up. We like Terrell Suggs coming in through free agency. They still have Chandler Jones. This team has weapons. They have players. I don't see any way they repeat and get another top 2, top 3 pick.
I think one of the hardest things to know is exactly what Kingsbury and Murray are going to do together on that offense. I mean, in my opinion, you can't go any worse than what you had last year. As much as Josh Rosen might be a great quarterback someday, his offense was absolutely terrible. I mean, he couldn't move the ball. And Larry Fitzgerald and David Johnson, Larry is obviously a shadow of his former self, but still a good receiver. David Johnson, I don't think was completely healthy. So now Kyler Murray's getting a healthier David Johnson than Josh Rosen. So there has to be somewhat of an increase. But this is one of those teams that can go 3 spots down or 3 spots up. It's really hard to say.
Exactly. They're kind of they are 3 spots lower than we actually had them before. Or sorry, 3 spots higher than we had them before going into the offseason. So we like what they've done. Again, I like Terrell Suggs. I think they're going to have an impact on the defensive line with him and Chandler Jones playing together. I just look at this team, and I'm sitting there saying they got a lot of good young rookies. I like what they did in free agency, especially bringing on other guys like Jordan Hicks. It's going to help this defense out.
Right.
Maybe, just maybe, we're talking about the Cardinals being a 6, 7, 8 win team if Kyler Murray turns out to be as good as like someone like Baker Mayfield was last year. They could be the next year's Browns.
Justin also went, but is Eli really Eli Manning still, or is that team bad?
I think you play Eli Manning until Daniel Jones is there. It's just like I said with Josh Rosen in that video I left in our highlight page way too long. Josh Rosen, you did not need to throw him to the Wolves. You should have waited until he was ready. I think they did that a little bit, and they had a bad season because of it. I think you can do the same thing with Daniel Jones. You don't have to throw him to the Wolves. They're building the offensive line. They've got the running game with Saquon Barkley. The offense is halfway going. You can wait until you see what you need to see in practice, and then just let Eli be the punching bag like he's been for the past 3 years. That's more than okay.
And Lewis says the Giants are going to be fine once they find their confidence.
I think it's possible. I think the defense is going to be rough this year. I think you've lost too much talent all at once off this defense to be good. I know they brought in a defensive lineman from Clemson with their other first-round pick, but that's not a quick fix. I don't see them being a quick turnaround on defense. This is going to be another year worth of building before this team is ready to compete for anything. The offense still looks okay. I mean, if you look at it on paper, they got a good tight end. They got 2 good receivers in Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate. Right. Maybe they're not elite, but they're serviceable wide receivers. The offensive line's getting better. You got Saquon Barkley, and presumably now, if you listen to Dave Gettleman, they got their quarterback at number 6. So the Giants should be okay.
Absolutely. And just a couple quick more comments. Ken said, give him 2 years and they'll be all right. And Brian says, play Eli until he gets
I think he was talking about the Cardinals when he was saying, give him 2 years and they'll be all right, instead of the Giants. I think the Giants are closer than that. But I'll give you that. I'm not going to say that the Cardinals are going to be a great team right away, but they've got a new, young, offensive-minded head coach. Maybe he turns out to be the next McVay. Maybe he's a bust. We don't know anything about Kingsbury in the pros. In fact, we don't really know anything about him because at A&M he wasn't the most successful guy in the world. But he's worked with a lot of successful quarterbacks. If I was a GM, I'd be willing to bet on a guy coaching up my quarterback that's done it before. When you see guys like Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield, I know you throw Manziel in the mix too because he coached him too. But when you see 2 out of 3 successes, I'd be willing to roll the dice on him working with my young quarterback.
Rob also says, how do you guys like the Steelers?
Well, we do like them, so we're a little ways away from talking
Middle
about
of the pack, but you'll see, man. We'll give you a number here shortly.
Drew's a little bit darker on them than I am, but that's okay. Let's talk about 27. Let's talk about Oakland. Now, this is actually a spot down, and it's kind of crazy when you talk about adding a guy like Antonio Brown and still losing a spot for Oakland. Is this kind of just a case of other teams doing better in the offseason than they did?
I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's a lot of head-scratchers on their draft. When you sit there and pick those players, I think you got solid players. I think you got players that are going to be stars in the NFL, probably Pro Bowlers at some point in time, but do they replace what you lost? And that's the question mark always.
And again, I don't even know if they got Pro Bowlers. I think instead of swinging for the fences with 3 picks in the first round, saying, hey, maybe we got the best defensive end, or we got the best wide receiver, we got the best defensive tackle, they went for the sure thing, or guys that they know are going to be okay, and didn't take any chances. They took Josh Jacobs. I think most people say Josh Jacobs is going to be a decent running back, but that's not the home run pick. They took safety in Abrams that everyone's like, hey, he could probably be a good, strong safety. We don't think Abrams is going to be the best safety in the NFL either. Cleveland Farrell, I mean, is he the best guy out there?
No, I'm laughing at the sirens.
I know.
This is the second time we've had to go right past here.
We got into a pretty bad neighborhood just overnight. Drew, you might want to list your house.
I think I'm moving, guys. Anyone looking for a house to buy?
Yeah, exactly. Going back to the Raiders here, I think they've done some interesting stuff.
See you, Ken. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. I think they've done some good stuff in Oakland, though. When you talk about what they've done a pretty good job of bringing in guys who might be good, like Antonio Brown. And I think we know Antonio Brown's going to have a good season. He's going to have a lot of catches. The question is, does it move you any closer to the playoffs? Maybe a little bit. And maybe it's unfair to us to say they dropped a little bit, but I look at some of these other teams and I'm looking at their big additions and what they've done. They're not bringing on 31-year-old receivers and saying this is going to be the face of the franchise going forward. They're not bringing on mediocre players in the draft. That's why I got to be a little bit critical of the Raiders here, because you had all this ammo, and I'm looking at the results. It's just not there for me.
You are a lot lower on the Raiders than I am. I actually think a lot of their offensive moves make them a little bit better of a team. I mean,
Tyrell Williams.
Yeah.
That's pretty cheap.
Antonio Brown, he's considered the best, if not one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Yeah, he's a little bit older, but body types like his seem to last a little bit longer at that receiving position. I like it. Honestly, I don't know what they're going to do because you never know what they're going to pan out. Is Farrell really worth, the pick they took him at? I mean, to me, no. You should have gone for the or the higher ceiling guy, not the for sure thing, the higher ceiling guy in Josh Allen. I mean, that's just what you should have done. If you'd have took one of the middle linebackers, I probably would have been okay with that, too.
I just think there were 10 to 12 picks that were better than that. I really do.
That's
You
what
could
I'm
have gone
saying.
offensive line and taken Jonah Williams. You
That's
could
what
have
I'm
even
getting
gone
at. There
Juwan
was
Taylor.
other picks
Yeah.
that would make more sense in that position than what you did. I like the Josh Jacobs picks. I know you're more down on it than I am, but I like a guy that doesn't have a lot of tread off his tires taken off. I mean, this guy's a football player. He's been playing football his whole life. He went to Alabama. He knows kind of what pros run. A pro's like a coach pro runs his team. He knows what it's like. He's not going to get any surprises coming in there. It's actually probably a little bit more laid back.
And you could have been like the Patriots and taken his teammate who Alabama saw fit to give about the same number of snaps to him, but you could have given it to him. Could have got him in the third round instead of the first. So that's where I'm kind of down on him. I don't dislike Josh Jacobs.
I don't know if he would have been there. I think he was higher on people's boards.
But that's okay. That's okay. You could have taken another running back a little bit later, and that would be fine. I guess my point here is they kind of got guys that, yes, I agree that they're all probably going to be good players, but none of these guys are going to be superstars. That, at least in my opinion, they're going to have to way outperform what everyone kind of expects them to do for them to be that. And for Oakland to go spend 3 picks on that, not just 1, to me, that's a big letdown. I like the Antonio Brown addition. I think they paid him too much. I think they gave up a lot to get it, or not a ton, but they gave up a lot to bring in a 31-year-old receiver. I don't know how many years you're getting out of Antonio Brown, but I like him in the short term. I like Tyrell Williams. You could have gone a lot of other ways with the draft, though, and that to me is the biggest, setback for the Raiders. I think when you talk about this next team, it's going to be a bit of a head scratcher, but I still think the Raiders, they've got a lot of work to do, and we don't know that Derek Carr's even going to be there long term. There's so much a team in flux. I can't put them any higher than this on the list.
I understand. I get it, and I agree with you.
Let's talk about 26, Drew, the Broncos. This is 1 spot higher. We actually had them flip, the Raiders and the Broncos, in our preseason or our pre-off-season power ranking. So, Do you see the Broncos having a good off-season here? Because I did. I like what they did. It wasn't flashy, but they upgraded a quarterback, right? You would agree Case Keenum is not as good as Joe Flacco, and then you bring on Drew Lock, who might be, the next heir apparent. You get him in the second round, so if it doesn't work out, that's okay too.
Exactly.
They didn't overspend on a quarterback. They didn't overspend on anything. They traded down with the Steelers to add more draft capital as well. I like what the Broncos have done here.
And I really like the Noah Fant draft, our pick. I really like that pick. I think he's going to go out really well. He's one of those tight ends that can definitely take the top off of defense with his speed. And I think his blocking ability is better than a lot of people give him credit for. When you have TJ Hawkinson next to you, a lot of that gets a little bit cited. Everyone's like, look what TJ can do. I don't think Noah Fant is any further away from TJ Hawkinson than a lot of people say it is. So when I look at that, I love it. And we all know that Joe Flacco loves his tight ends.
Yes.
So bringing in someone like that there were definitely a need for, it was huge. And then I also still like the backfield that the Broncos have. With Philip Lindsay and Freeman. You're talking about 2 young guys that have tons of tread still left on the tire that can make a huge difference in this offense, especially now that they have a quarterback who believes in his arm. I don't think Case Keenum fully believes in what he can do behind a center. I just don't. I don't believe in Case Keenum as a starting quarterback in the NFL. And let's not forget one thing, too. This defense still has some of the best pass rushers in the NFL.
I agree, and I think that's still what sells it to me. I think when you look at the Broncos, they still have the defense there that kept Chris Harris around, at least up till now. Yeah. We're still talking about them having guys like Bradley Chubb and Von Miller going after the quarterback. They got better on the offensive side of the ball, which was their biggest woe from last season. They got a little bit better on the offensive line as well.
And Vic Fangini is no joke. This guy can coach.
Absolutely. I'm not crazy about that hire, but I think it's okay. I think it's somewhere in the middle where he could be effective, and maybe he brings his defense back to where it needs to be.
One thing I want you to think about. Think about that Bears defense 2 years ago before they had Mac. He was still
pretty good.
It was a darn good defense.
Pretty good. Top 10, yeah.
And he was calling it the whole entire time. I actually think the Bears defense is going to take a step back because they don't have Vic calling these plays. It's not going to be a huge step.
I don't.
But I think it's going to be a step back. I think you're going to see the Broncos defense take a step forward. To be honest, Broncos are one of those teams in the AFC West that kind of makes me a little nervous because when you look at the games against the Chargers and the Chiefs, who obviously did the best during those in that division, they played them really well all 4 of those games.
Justin also said Drew Lock is the next Aaron Rodgers draftee to sit 3 years or so, and then they build up Sutton and Fant in the offense and takes off running, he thinks. I don't think so. I mean, I don't think Drew Lock, to me, he's a developmental guy. I think best case scenario, you're talking about a Derek Carr situation where you take this guy in the second round and he kind of surprises you and he has some Pro Bowl years and he has some years where he's maybe not quite as good. I'm not as high on Drew Lock. I think he's, again, a build prospect. He's not one of those guys that's going to come in right away and make something. Maybe you're right. Maybe he sits like Aaron Rodgers did and we see a big improvement, but I think the Broncos, at the very least, need to get better at wide receiver for anyone to step into those roles. Because let's not forget, Aaron Rodgers had a ton of weapons.
I completely disagree with that, Justin. The only reason I said that, there is no more sitting a quarterback for 3 years in the NFL. Because you look at John Elway and what he's done, he has not won anything since Peyton Manning's gone away. You know, his job is going to be on this hot seat here very soon, especially if some of these guys don't pan out. Let's just say Joe Flacco goes out there, and they're still, again, a top 10 draft pick next year because this team isn't doing well. You're going to sit there and tell me the fans and the ownership's going to say, don't start Drew
Well, that is a fair point.
Give him a second
to develop. That is a fair point, but he did that with someone else.
Out there right away.
He did that once already, though. He did it with Paxton Lynch. And I think we've already seen the history that he's saying, I'm willing to sit there and wait. And maybe you could sit there and say it's because Paxton Lynch wasn't any good, and they knew that. You know, after they drafted him, obviously, but they knew that and they didn't start him. But he's done it once. We've seen Elway be conservative before and say, I'm willing to let this guy build and sit behind somebody. They didn't trade for Joe Flacco to go draft a quarterback and say, we're going to go play him from day one.
I would go ahead and say, if you don't have a quarterback that's been starting for your offense for the last 5 years that is really good, that has done well for you, making you in the playoffs, and you draft a quarterback in the third round or higher, that you're not planning on starting that year or the next year.
Does Eli need to worry about his job?
Yes, absolutely. These 3-year waiting quarterbacks don't happen anymore.
I think it's okay for it to happen again. I think it is.
It is,
well,
but it doesn't happen anymore.
Hear me out. I think a lot of teams have gone away from that, but I think there's still some conservative organizations that are willing to do it. I don't know if the Broncos are that team. I think, like you said, Elway's been given a lot of rope to this point, and now he's running to the point where he's going to hang himself, expression-wise. I think when you look at what Elway has done, you look at all these missteps at quarterbacks. He needs a hit. If Drew Lock if Joe Flacco comes out and struggles, you're right. They may sit there and hit the panic button and say, "I got to save my job. It's time to make a change." But I think they're going to go. I think they're going to go with the safe. I think they're going to go with the safe bet. I don't think anyone's sitting there saying the Broncos are going to win this division.
No, I'm telling you, that's the only way Drew Lock doesn't see the field this year.
I guess we'll see. I really do. I don't think they're going to do anything too drastic or too dramatic with him. But I've been wrong before. I didn't think Josh Rosen was going to see the field right away. But they threw him to the wolves. Same thing with Sam Darnold, especially with guys like McCown. You're right. We've seen that trend where guys get started a lot earlier these days. But I think some of these GMs are starting to learn from that, saying, hey, Josh Rosen got thrown to the wolves. I don't want that to happen to my guy.
Justin, I get it, man. I'm not saying that it shouldn't happen either. I'm not sitting there saying that. It's just in today's NFL, GMs are literally looking for the next Patrick Mahomes, the next Baker Mayfield. And if they think that they have one sitting there in the third, second round, they're going to start him at some point in time. They will make the call over the head coach to save their job. And if Elway is losing his job, he gets on the hot seat, and Flacco's not winning a game, you better believe you're going to see Lock in there.
All right, now we got to talk about the Lions at 25.
Let's do it.
Are you ready to move on? Ready to go back to power rankings, Drew? I mean, we can talk about this for forever. I know we can. And it's not just you, it's me. Let's talk about the Lions because I think they're one of the teams that's improved quietly without many people talking about them. Bring on a guy like Trey Flowers. Yes, I know they paid him a lot of money, but this guy pretty much single-handedly was the front seven, him and probably Hightower, for the Patriots. So for them, I know everyone's going to sit there and say, Matt Patricia, he wants to live in Belichick's shadow, all that other stuff. They still got a really good football player, and I know they paid him, but they paid him a lot of money, and he's worth it. This, for the defensive end set for them, I think is going to be fantastic. I think the Lions have improved on the defense when they've already done upgrades at the defensive tackle position. Bring on a defensive end as well. If they get one or two more pieces on this defense, we're going to be talking about them that being their strength in Detroit, not necessarily Matt Stafford in the offense anymore.
No, you're right. I mean, it's New England 2.0, and they drafted like New England did too. I would say Patricia did really well taking all of his notes from Belichick. I think they drafted pretty decently for this draft for what they could. I like the T.J. Hawkinson pick. Kind of reminds you of a Gronk-esque kind of tight end that they're definitely been missing. In
Gronkowski's what you meant to say, not Gronk-ass.
No, I said Gronk-esque.
Gronk-esque.
Esque.
All right.
Dude.
You said Gronk-ass.
That's okay.
That's what you're thinking about. All right. I'm just saying the jokes were on me a couple episodes ago. Now the jokes are on you.
I know you called them hot, so
watch out for those hot hockey players. And you're staring at Gronk-ass. Moving forward, talking about this Lions team. Yeah, I agree with you. I like the Hawkinson pick here. I do. I do like this. So I really do like that they've tried to readdress this tight end position, not because they're getting another receiver, but because they're getting a guy who can help out Kerryon Johnson. He can help out the run game as well. You can pound the rock with a tight end like Hawkinson because he can block, and then he can also squirt out and go get the pass. So, yeah, I know. I'm throwing all these puns in there now. You don't know what to think.
Well, you got ass on my mind. Now you're talking about squirting. I don't know what's going on. Bees, thank you for your comments. We always appreciate it, man. And I did not say ass. I said S. And I just didn't, okay?
I'm gonna leave that alone. Going back to the Lions, man, they did a good job here. Look, I still think they could have got better receiver. I still think they could have upgraded the offensive line. I still think they could have added some other pieces on the back end of that secondary. But they did okay. They brought a lot of guys in. I think they're better now than they were. They're moving up. I think Matt Stafford, if you take a little bit off his plate, I know we've been saying it's going to be his year if you do that. I think this might actually be the year the Lions take a half step forward. They're not challenging the Packers or Vikings or Bears. They're probably still the fourth team. But this might be the fourth team of the division that wins 6 games instead of the fourth team of the division that wins 3 or 4.
Yeah, I don't fully believe the Lions have made all the right moves. I just think they're going the right direction. They got a corner next to Darius Slay, so they're going to have 2 corners. I like it. I like the tight end move. I think that's the right move. But nothing in there goes, okay, they're going to be that much better. I think Matthew Stafford
Well, I think Hawkinson's supposed to be that pick, but I think you're right. I don't think he's there.
Matthew Stafford needs a lot around him to be back to an elite. I know everyone's like, well, he did a better year after
Calvin Johnson
retired. But you know what? I think they were still in the shadow of Calvin Johnson. I really honestly do. But now you look at it, a few years departed, and I think
a lot of it was injury too. I think they lost Golden Tate at the trade deadline, which is week 8. It's not very far into the season. I think Marvin Jones was battling some injuries. I don't think Kenny Galladay is good enough by himself to carry the team, but I think he's a good receiver, especially as a 2 or a 3. I agree with you. They need to get better, but I'm not pinning it all on Matt Stafford. I still think he's a good quarterback. I still think they need to build a team around him, and it's tough when you pay him this kind of money. It's that kind of criticism we always put there.
That's my whole point, yeah.
But that money's spent. You got to spend to keep him. Exactly. You got to spend to keep a guy like that. Unfortunately, he's one of the higher paid quarterbacks in the league, and when that happens, you can't put the best team around him.
Yep.
Let's move on. Let's talk about the Jaguars at 24, because this, a 4-spot increase, is they're a head-scratching team, right? We don't know what the Jaguars are going to look like with Nick Foles.
I really like the Nick Foles required him. It was great. It was the right move. You need a quarterback. But my question marks are still on that defense. When that defense gave up last year, I mean, a lot of these players are still there. And it was one of the worst defenses after they started out being one of the best. And when they realized, hey, we're not winning games, it seemed like that defense fell apart. So my biggest question is, what if it takes a minute for Nick Foles to get a hang of this offense? What if it takes a minute before Nick Foles can click with his receivers, which there really aren't any of them? I mean, what if it takes a minute? So what if they start this season 0-3, 0-4? I mean, did the defense give up again?
They could.
And then you have a crappy team again in the Jaguars?
They could. And remember, these are power rankings, so absolutely they could certainly move down our list. But I think right now, when you look at what the defense did, you have to give them some credit. We know this is still a good unit, or they have the potential to be. Do they have the attitude that you want to see out of a Super Bowl team? Probably not. They're probably not there yet. Even Tom Coughlin's brought that into question when it comes to showing up to voluntary minicamps with guys like Jalen Ramsey. So they have their share of question marks, but they've improved at quarterback, which is the most important position, right? They've got a Super Bowl MVP. If this is any other Super Bowl MVP, we'd be talking about how they're the next team to win the Super Bowl. Okay, almost any other MVP. But the Jaguars have definitely improved at quarterback, in my opinion. They've definitely got better with Nick Foles. You look at the way this defense has played. Yes, they have not played their best football in the past year. But 2 years, we're not far removed, and we're still got a lot of players from that defense that was absolutely dominant 2 years ago. I think this Nick Foles signing might be able to revitalize the team. And then let's talk about the draft, man. Josh Allen at 7.
Falls to them, yeah.
Absolute steal. Best pick in the draft. And then Juwan Taylor, the offensive lineman. Everyone's like, they're going to take in the first round. Falls to them in the second. This team is one of the most improved in football. I still see 4 spots. Might be a bit of an undersell for us. I get what you're saying. They don't have the receivers yet.
It's the heart. It's the heart of this team. Does exist.
Heart's tough to measure. I mean, remember, this is the same team that had the heart to go to the AFC Championship 2 years ago.
Yeah, but they seem to just lose everything after that, man.
Well, it's Blake Bortles. And guess who's gone?
No, it's not just Blake Bortles because
he's a big part of it. It's a lot of it's Blake Bortles.
But that defense fell off. They were the number 1 defense. And then Kansas City beat them, and then it went away.
Well, I'm not going to put it all on Kansas City.
No,
I mean, maybe they demoralized them.
No,
maybe
but
that
it was
that
the
game
timeline of when they started going down.
They did, and maybe it was one of those come-to-Jesus moments where you're like, dang, we just got rocked. Like, maybe we're not that good, and maybe it shook their confidence or something. But I'll give you this. The Jaguars are much improved, I think, on defense, bringing in a guy like Josh Allen because the edge rush position, Calais Campbell's one of the oldest pass rushers that's been as effective as he is in the NFL. They needed guys that are going to be able to address that. Josh Allen is like the perfect, guy to slot in there for that.
Absolutely.
They got better on the defense. They got better on the offense with Juwan Taylor hopefully shoring up that right tackle position for them. They got better at quarterback, which I think everyone agrees is really important in the NFL.
Yeah.
Yes, they need a few more things. They need some wide receivers. That's why we have them at 24. But you got to admit they're in a better spot now than they were going into 2018.
Yeah, and that's why they moved up 4 spots on us. And Bees also says the Jags are a good receiver and tight end away from becoming a threat.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think they're already a threat.
I think they're already a threat. I just don't believe in that defense's heart. I don't believe if they go 0-3 or 0-4 at the beginning of the season, I don't think they're going to turn around. I think you're going to have people quit on anything. I think you're going to see Jalen Ramsey and Telvin Smith kind of just give up.
I agree. I think attitude is the biggest setback for this team at this point because it's not talent. They have talent all over
Leonard
the board.
Fournette.
That's going to be the question. Can they keep everybody in line with somebody like Doug Marrone, a coach who I like as a coach?
What if he gets banged up and doesn't want to play? I mean, I'm not saying that's what he did last year, but why would he ruin his career playing for a team that isn't any good?
Especially with them talking about getting rid of him.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk about 23, Drew. Let's move on to the Jets. 2 spots higher than we had going into the offseason. That's kind of low in my opinion. I mean, we talk about guys like C.J. Mosley coming to this, who might be one of the best linebackers in football. You talk about Le'Veon Bell, who might be one of the best running backs in football coming to this team. They've improved. Maybe not in the areas we wanted to see them improve at wide receiver and tight end, but they've improved.
Yeah, I would say they improved. Honestly, I'd like to throw these 2 picks in together. At number 23, we had the Jets. At number 22, we had the Bills. And the reason why I like to throw these 2 together is I like what all these teams have done during the offseason and free agency and draft. I like what the Jets defense looks like. They're going to get Marcus May back to fill in there with Adams. They also picked up C.J. Mosley and drafted Quinnen Williams. I like all those moves. They look like they're going to be real stout right in the middle of that defense. Their corners are a little bit question mark. Tremaine Johnson's still there. Brian Poole depends on how he can play.
I think they're hoping Tremaine Johnson goes back to his days with the Rams where he was absolutely elite.
It's still a really good defense.
Paid him a lot of money, and he took a step back. We say it all the time. It happens. Maybe year 2 gets better. So I agree with you. The defense is, like you said, hugely improved. They've absolutely focused on fixing this defense. We would have liked to see some more receivers on this team. We would have liked to not see them pay guys like Quincy Enunwa a lot of money to stick around and play wide receiver.
But I do like what they did at quarterback. They brought in Le'Veon Bell. He's going to create a lot of room for these receivers to find lanes to be open. And the problem is can Sam Darnold have enough time behind that offensive line that was a little bit of a question mark.
They've tried to address it. They brought in guys like Osimile, and yes, they could have spent more. But remember, this is a former Pro Bowler that they brought in from Oakland for a 5th-round pick. So, yeah, they paid him a lot of money, or they picked up a contract that he's owed a lot of money. But I'll give them this. They're trying to make things happen on the cheap. We could say there's only so much you could do at a single time. I absolutely believe they've done the best they can. I like this offseason for them. Did they rock the world? They spent a lot of money, and they got better at a couple positions, which is important. So
Andrew says he thinks the Jets can go 9-7 this year, man. I'm agreeing with you. I honestly think that defense can do it, and I think Le'Veon Bell is just one of those dynamic backs that can create you 2 to 3 wins on just him alone.
And I like Le'Veon Bell a lot. I don't know if the running back's that important of a position to get you 2 to 3 wins by itself, but I think the offensive line's better. I think Sam Darnold will be better next year. I hope. Hopefully we don't see a sophomore slump for him.
Ask the Vikings that when Adrian Peterson was going.
Okay, but who replaced him for the rest of the offense? So I'll give you that. There's like one, but look at the Giants. They moved up 4 picks in the draft with Saquon Barkley, and they spent the 2nd overall pick on him. So not everybody succeeds at running back is my point.
But Le'Veon Bell's been doing it for a lot longer than Saquon Barkley.
The better example would say, look at Todd Gurley with or without the Rams. And I'll give you that. But more often than not, unless you're getting a special player at running back, and Le'Veon Bell is special, I agree with you there, you're probably not talking about a ton of wins here. The defense, I think, is the X factor for them winning a lot of the games in there, and I think we both agree. They got a lot better on defense.
No doubt. Deo says the Colts are winning their 3rd ring this year. I think it might be stretching it.
You're jumping the gun
a little bit, man.
You're jumping the gun. Maybe next year. Look, if Chris Ballard spent that $100 million, we're talking about C.J. Mosley and Le'Veon Bell on this team, I'd say, yeah, I'm on that train. But he didn't. He stayed way, way, way too conservative, in my opinion. Look, I get it. He's trying to build for the future, and if you're a team that's up against it on cap or you're somewhere in the middle, that's okay. You had the farm to sell and spend all this money, and you didn't do it. We'll talk about the Colts later. We still think they're a really good team. We love Andrew Luck as a quarterback. This isn't the year for him, though. Bringing out Justin Houston by himself doesn't win you a Super Bowl. And you're a Justin Houston guy. I am too. I like him.
He has a lot left in the tank, too. I think he's going to play well for him.
But the question to me is one edge rusher going to be the difference? And I just don't see it.
Bees also says the Jets aren't that good. Bell will help them win, but the receivers aren't that good.
No, I agree with that. Absolutely.
I do think that they got a little bit better. I think Crowder is a really good slot receiver, but the problem is their 1 and 2 doesn't really scare anybody.
Exactly. They have a bunch of guys in the receiving room. They don't have a bunch of threats, so I think that's why we have them this low.
All right, let's move on to the Bills at number 22.
We just talked about them, but well, I guess we didn't go into depth.
Let's
go into depth. They did lose a spot in our draft, or in our rankings, I should say, from before the offseason here. When you look at the Bills and you look at what they've done, they've added some receivers, no one earth-shattering. They added a bunch of offensive linemen, both of which were needs for this team, but they really didn't sign, except maybe Mitch Morris, they didn't really sign anyone that jumps off the page at you, right? I mean, guys like Cole Beasley and John Brown. John Brown, I think, is a good receiver. He's a guy who's going to be able to stretch out the field a little bit with Robert Foster on this team, but
I like the speed they brought into the receiving corps.
They needed to get better at receiver, and they did.
Yeah.
But did they get that much better at receiver? And that's my question. I don't know. Maybe John Brown gives you 500, 600, 700 yards this year. Maybe Cole Beasley's a good slot receiver. I look at this team, though, for the Bills. They probably could have added a little bit more, and they probably needed to. Because this, to me, is a year where the Patriots are becoming a little more susceptible when you look at what they've lost. They could have got a little more aggressive. Instead, they brought in a bunch of what-ifs on the offensive line, and they brought on some receivers that they're like, we think we can make something happen with these guys, but it's no Antonio Brown. And I know they tried, but at the end of the day, they failed, right? They didn't bring in the stud wide receiver who's going to absolutely revolutionize a franchise.
Right, you're right. And they still got a really solid defense. When they bring in Ed Oliver, I think that's a great replacement for Chris Williams, who just retired for them. And, things like that, they did the right moves. They still got Tremaine Edmonds, their linebacker they took last year,
It's Tremaine Edmonds.
Yeah, Tremaine Edmonds. Okay, he's a stud. I like that. I still think their secondary is a very underrated secondary.
They've addressed the defensive line. They lost Kyle Williams. They brought in Ed Oliver instead.
I said Chris Williams, but yeah,
right.
You're absolutely right. That's what they did the right thing to move on in their offense. They fixed their offensive line, did a complete revamp of it. But until you see the first game or 2 games down, I just can't think highly of the Bills just yet to get them over 22.
I think the defense is going to be good. I think they've tried to address that again. I think the defense is still going to be a pretty solid unit. I think the offense will be slightly better, so it's kind of strange to see them drop a little bit in our rankings. But I think it's because other teams have done better at adding pieces to their team than the Bills have done. Again, they spent a lot of money on a bunch of offensive linemen, and I think one of them might be good. Maybe 2 if you count Quentin Spain coming from the Titans. For the most part, I really don't think they've fixed the offensive line. I think these are a lot of guys who are going to wash out here in a year or 2. So the Bills, again, they needed to grow a lot if they were going to contend for a title or even contend for the playoffs. I don't think they grew enough. That's why I still have them at 22.
Andrew says he has the Bills going 6-10, need more offense.
I agree. They need more offense. I think it's probably a 7-9 or 8-8. I don't know. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I got to think on it. I think this is one of those teams that we saw Josh Allen win a lot of games with his legs this year. Do we see that happen again, or do defenses kind of adjust and find a way, like Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, to take him out of it?
Yeah.
Let's talk about 21 though, Drew, the 49ers.
Let's do it.
Another team that's dropped, and this, to me, the biggest subtraction. Look, they spent big money to bring in D Ford and got him pretty cheap when you talk about the pick they gave up for it. But they signed him to a long-term contract with a lot of money. They brought in Quan Alexander, who should help the defense out, but they paid a lot of money for him. This, to me, has been the same complaint about John Lynch that I've had since he's got there. He's brought in good players, but he's way, way, way overpaid to do it. And you can't build a team when you overpay a couple guys. It always winds up biting you in the back. At one point, good to see you, Shea. And I think the 49ers are still in the same kind of position here. We've given them the benefit of the doubt for years now with Jimmy G, saying he's a great quarterback. He just needs to stay healthy. He needs to stay on the field. And what's happened, Drew? He's been hurt every year, right? Even the year in the Patriots, before he got traded, he wound up breaking his thumb when Tom Brady was out for the first couple games. This guy cannot stay on the field. If this is going to be a great team, I need to see 16 games before I buy into the hype again.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. They obviously drafted Nick Bosa, so they really focused on their pass rush. DeForest Buckner, that just came out there, hit them in the 49ers to extend them, are way off on price. I think, again, it's another sign of John.
Don't worry, John Lynch will pay him.
I think it's another sign of John Lynch not being that great of a GM. But really why I have him this low, and the reason they dropped 4 spots for me, is because we don't know what we're getting out of Jimmy G. Because as much as I like the guy, as much as I thought his talent would make the world of a difference, he's struggling. He's struggling to stay healthy. He's struggling to stay on the field. And, you you lost a receiver and Garcon. You bring in other receivers out of the draft. I think it's a good thing, but sometimes when you don't have that experience at receiver and you got a quarterback that can't stay healthy and you're rotating quarterbacks, it's hard for a team to be successful.
And they were at least competitive with guys like Nick Mullins and C.J. Beathard. They brought in a bunch of other guys and have stayed competitive. I think that's more a sign of Kyle Shanahan's offense being one of the best in football than I do think it's anything else or talent on this roster by any means. I think this is just one of those teams that, unless you get 16 games out of this quarterback, they're not a good enough team to carry. They're not a team that can go and have a backup and win a game or two. Even if Jimmy G misses 2 or 3, that might be enough to sink the season. So I think the 49ers are still a year removed. I want to see another good offseason before we talk about how good of a team this can wind up being. And I don't know if John Lynch is really the guy to get them there, because he seems like he overpays on every free agent he can seem to find. He falls in love with guys and then just opens the wallet.
B says the 49ers will get second in the division, but then Scott says, well, maybe it's a coaching for Jimmy G, and then, of course, Shea doesn't like Jimmy because he's not
a saint.
He's not a saint. But, I got to agree with all that. And Andrew goes off, says this will be a big year for Jimmy G. If he gets hurt or doesn't play good for the 49ers, they will need to draft a quarterback this next year. I think they're all right.
Are we there?
I think every
time.
If he can't stay healthy, absolutely. I mean, and that sucks for him, because I think he has all the talent in the world, but if you can't stay healthy, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. You can't score any touchdowns from the bench. If he gives them 14, I think this team can make it. I think they can survive 2 games without him. Anything short of that, I think this team is probably 7-9 or below. And I really do believe that Jimmy G, even though, like you said, he's a talented quarterback, his health is his biggest weakness. And look, Sam Bradford was supposed to be a great quarterback too, right? And then he wound up not playing in the field. And what does everyone think about? Do you want Sam Bradford being the quarterback for your team?
Sam Bradford never learned how to fall.
Okay, well, Jimmy G never learned how to run to the sideline.
I'll talk a little bit positive about the 49ers. I like what they did in their backfield. I like the fact they're going to get McKinnon back, and I like Tevin Coleman. I like the two, mixture of the two. Hopefully they could, gain some ground so they don't have to be chucking the ball over the place, because I think one of the biggest issues, even beyond George Kittle, their receiving core is going to be a little bit rough. Not that Garcon made the whole difference in the world, but they didn't have Jimmy G for a whole year.
It was a weakness we were expecting them to address, and they didn't do it in any kind of big way, so we're kind of still looking around like, okay, who's catching the ball for them?
Especially when they had all the cap space to do it.
Absolutely. I totally agree there. The other thing I'll say is, what a weird running back room when you're talking about Jerick McKinnon being the 2nd or 3rd highest paid running back in football, and then you're talking about Tevin Coleman playing for peanuts. So, I wonder if that becomes an issue. If Tevin Coleman's looking around like, dude, I'm the better running back than this guy, and you're paying him like twice what you're paying me. So, again, the 49ers are in a weird spot with a cap. They've spent money on weird spots. I think they moved down. Again, this is a 4-spot drop for us, but this is a team that still has some potential. Let's talk about 20 here, Drew, because I think we're only going to get about halfway through this.
Yeah, I think it's so too.
And here I thought for once we'd be able to talk about an NFL topic in one show. Let's talk about the Panthers at 20.
Let's do it.
Because this is one of the big mystery teams. I have them actually moving up 3 spots from our pre-offseason things, and I think a lot of it comes down to Will Grier. We were kind of scared for the Panthers, sitting there saying, what are they going to do at quarterback? We don't know that Cam Newton's going to play. Let's say he misses the entire season here. Are you comfortable with Will Grier taking the reins from day one and being the quarterback in Carolina?
No. And I'll tell you why. It's because that offense is built around what Cam Newton can do with his legs. They like to run the ball. They like to make sure it's a lot of bootlegs, a lot of move out of the pocket. Not saying that Will Grier can't do it. He can move with his legs, but you're going to have a lot of struggle getting that where you don't have a player built like Cam. These linemen are kind of used to letting their blocks go a little bit early because they know Cam can get out of that situation. Cam's no longer there. They're going to have to kind of evaluate their offensive line going, you're going to have to hold a little bit longer because Will Grier can't do
block a little bit longer. We don't need you to hold.
It's holding. It's holding. And they're going to need them to do that. Don't get me wrong. They're still going to run the ball perfectly fine. McCaffrey and whoever is the second running back on that depth chart, the run game is still going to be there. I fully believe in that. It's just when an offense is built around a mobile big quarterback and you put in someone like Will Grier or any other quarterback, there is a huge changeover.
And the reason I'm saying they're getting better is because I believe they addressed the backup quarterback position. I think our biggest kind of question mark was, without Cam Newton playing, what is this roster going to look like? I think they're going to be fine. I think we saw a big drop-off once Cam got hurt last season. This was a team that, remember, started like 6-2 and then managed to drop like 7 of the last 8, I think. I think this team is going to wind up being okay with a guy like Will Grier at the reins because they're so focused on running the ball. They're so focused on defense. You don't need to ask a ton of these quarterbacks. And when you have big receivers like they do in Carolina, I think they'll be able to make it work with a guy like Will Grier, who, from a clean pocket, has been pretty good. The offensive line is still a concern, but I believe they're trying to at least address that a little bit. I think they're getting better on that side of the ball. I think this backup quarterback by himself in Will Grier is enough to instill enough confidence in me to say that Carolina's in a much better place than they were than even in 2018 when Cam Newton started having an injury problem with that shoulder.
Andrew says losing Devin Funchess may be bigger than people think. Man, I completely agree. But I also have to say, where was he at the end of the season? You had a young quarterback that wasn't ready to be in the offense, that you needed to step up, and it seemed like no one on the receiving end stepped up besides McCaffrey. Not saying that Funchess isn't good, but that's the time where he should have shown himself.
And you got guys like Curtis Samuel, who was a second-round pick. You have DJ Moore as a first-round pick. It's time for those young guys to step into those picks and be worth what you spent on them. I agree, losing Devin Funchess might be an issue for them, but you have receivers that you've spent highly on. It's time for them to pan out a little bit. You still have Greg Olsen, who hopefully can give you another good season at tight end. I look at this Panthers team, and I'm not saying the offense is the issue. I really think the offensive line is the biggest, question mark for Will Grier, but he's got receivers that should be able to make things happen. He's got Christian McCaffrey, who's a good running back as well. They should have the weapons to make it work. Defense hopefully plays a little bit better.
Scott says a running quarterback equals a short career.
I think we all agree. I think we all agree.
That's just shown.
Absolutely. I mean, nobody can take those
right,
hits.
Man.
I don't think there's a human on the face of this planet that can take those kind of hits year in and year out when you're talking about getting hit several hundred times a year like Cam Newton can. And expect to have a 25-year or 20-year career in the NFL or 15-year career in the NFL. It's just not possible when these guys are 330 pounds and run like they're 195 pounds. You just can't do it. Let's move forward, though. Let's talk about the Ravens. At 19, another big dropper for us, Drew, at least for me. You kind of fought me on this one. I have them dropping 7 spots, and so does the show, going all the way down to number 19 here.
Yeah, I did fight you a little bit, but real quick, Andrew says, how many years do you think Cam has left?
Hopefully some. I mean, with this shoulder injury at this age.
How old he is?
He's 31, I believe.
Is he 30 now?
Yeah, he's 31, I think, or 30. He's 30 or 31. And with this shoulder injury, he's not Andrew Luck. He's not a guy who stands in the pocket and minimizes hits.
If he plays till 36, and I think he might get 3 or 4 more good years depending on how that shoulder repairs itself, I think 36 is a great career for Cam Newton.
Yeah, I think that's an optimistic view. Really, I think when you look at what running quarterbacks usually put up, 36 is a pretty good career for anyone who's more mobile than anything. I mean, Mike Vick had to go to prison to make it that long.
It's all depending on how his shoulder repairs it. So,
absolutely.
So far, the way he says and the way the doctors are saying, he's above what he should be. He's doing a lot better. Timeline, he's ahead of it. But that doesn't always mean anything until you start throwing a football around. Ask Andrew Luck.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Ravens.
Let's do it.
The reason I have them falling this far is because the best part of the Ravens last year, it wasn't Joe Flacco, it wasn't any of these receivers, it wasn't anything on the offensive side of the ball, it's the defense, and they had some pretty major subtractions. So I look at this, Drew, and I'm worried for him. I really am. I mean, losing guys like Zadarius Smith, C.J. Mosley, who might be the second or third best linebacker in the NFL, you're talking about a lot of subtractions on the defensive side of the ball. I know they signed Earl Thomas as well, but you lost a veteran in the guy who went to the Rams, Eric Weddle. They've lost a lot of this defensive side of the ball. The question to me is Earl Thomas going to be enough to make up for it by himself? I'm going to go probably not. I think they're going to take a step back on defense. I'm already not in love with their quarterback position with Lamar Jackson. Receiver-wise, they've got a lot of question marks now. They got rid of John Brown, who they saw could make things happen with Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
With Lamar Jackson under center, he pretty much disappeared. Crabtree's gone too. I get it. They drafted some guys to replace him, but you never know what those guys are going to turn into. This is a team in flux, and when you're a team like this that's normally conservative and you've got a lot of things changing and you're maybe not as good on defense, I see a step back in the future.
Yeah, it's really hard not to make them go back. And, Jimmy, the answer is yes. It is. But you know what we always say about the Ravens? They don't have a lot of names on their defense, and they always seem to be really good. And one thing they are trying to focus on is that run game, and I think they're going to run that game. You got to also remember they picked up the running back from the Saints, who I'm blanking on his name.
Mark Ingram. I mean, good addition, and that's what they do.
Real good, powerful runner, someone to sit there and match up with Gus Edwards. And I like what they did at receiving corps in the draft, because you got to sit there and think, when Lamar Jackson took over, John Brown disappeared. Crabtree disappeared. Snead did okay. And guess what they did?
He did okay for Snead.
They got rid of the receivers that weren't matching up. They got some young receivers to match up with their young quarterback. Now the question is, does that speed and does that height and does this playmaking ability help a quarterback that struggles with accuracy? That's the question. And I'm not saying it fixes everything. I think the biggest issue really here is, does that defense come back out of losing all that? I like the Earl Thomas signing. I really wish the Chiefs would have got him instead, but so be it. I still think there's too much questions on the defense.
Let's talk about the Vikings next at 18, Drew, because I look at this squad. They didn't have any kind of movement on our picks between going into the offseason, going in out of the offseason. But I think they made some additions. I think this is a team that's still marginally better than where they were. Maybe we're not seeing them move up in the rankings, but they've tried to address this offensive line, both between signing guys and drafting them. That was the biggest weakness, right? That was the elephant in the room. You got to fix this offensive line and keep Kirk Cousins safe.
Aaron, we're based out of Nashville. They're my second favorite team. I'm personally an Avalanche fan, and then I'm a Predators fan. So make fun of me if you want. And you like the Predators.
I do, yes.
So make
they
fun
are
of
my
him
favorite
all you
hockey
like.
team. Look, you can make fun of whoever you want. You want something else in the bar, send it to us. We'll put it up here. Talking about the Vikings here really quick, though, this is a team that has everything on paper. The defense should be good. They have great wide receivers. They have a great tight end. Maybe got better with Irv Smith coming in with that second spot behind Kyle Rudolph. It's all about offensive line. With an offensive line, this team is a playoff team. With an offensive line, this team can challenge guys like the Bears and the Packers. They didn't have it last year. The question is, do they now? I think they're closer, but I still think they need to add a couple guys before we're talking about the Vikings being a legitimate Super Bowl contender again.
Well, let's not forget, they haven't really lost a whole lot, and they struggled. There's no doubt about it. A team that should have been in the playoffs, that a lot of people considered one of the better teams in the NFC, didn't make it. And, you know,
the question for me is, how do you respond?
So minus, like, any of, like, the additions and subtractions, where did they change in the end of the season last year where it goes, oh, this team is turning around? Because I would never say it. To be honest with you, I think more question marks happened at the end of the season for the Vikings than really the beginning of the season. Because when you go into the draft then, one thing that really kind of makes me go, okay, what? Is they drafted a running back. You got Dalvin Cook. And when Dalvin Cook started out as a rookie, that guy lit the world on fire. I literally said last year that I thought he'd be the leading rushing in the NFL. And obviously he got injured, and that did not happen. They did not run the ball. But now you're drafting another young running back.
To replace Latavius Murray, who went to the Saints. I think they believe in that 1-2 punch.
Do you really? Well, Dalvin Cook was the lead guy. He was it.
No, I agree. But have we seen Dalvin Cook make it 16 games and stay impactful? He had a great 4 his rookie year. He played well last year at times, but they didn't run enough. And I think they kind of admit that they didn't run enough.
I'm going to answer your question with asking you the same question. Where do you see that the Vikings did any improvement? Because I don't see it.
At the offensive line. I think they're doing things that obviously couldn't get any worse when you talk about their guard play specifically, but they brought in, I believe, was it Andre Dillard they drafted? They drafted a high-end offensive lineman here in the draft. They also went and signed guys like Josh Klein that are going to play guard and try to make an impact. Do I think they're the best guys in the world? No, but they're trying things out. They're trying to find fixes. They need to get better in that position. I totally agree with you. Andrew kind of hit the nail on the head. He says Cousins needs to be more consistent for them to get to the playoffs. I agree with you, but here's how you do it. He is a stand-and-throw-it quarterback. You need to work on this offensive line to buy him the time to make him more consistent. You cannot have this guy running for his life like Case Keenum did. The reason you had success is because even though that line was bad with Case Keenum, he was able to scramble and make things happen. Cousins isn't that guy. You can't go into this year saying the offensive line could be subpar and we're going to have a success. I agree, and I think they kind of agree with you. That's why they fired their offensive coordinator in Week 15. We're going to see more of an emphasis on the run game. We're going to see more of an emphasis on the offensive line here going forward. The question is it enough? And I don't think so. I don't think it's enough for me to sit there and say they're going back to the playoffs yet, but I think we'll see improvement from last year on this offensive line.
We literally had them dead even at number 18 on the end of the season. I think it's literally, again, what we're saying here is you're a little bit higher on them than I am. I'm more of that where they could be the worst team in the league or they could be one of the best teams in this league because they got players in all in the right positions. That's the question mark is you didn't have to do a whole lot to get better, but you still didn't get better. And I agree with you. They worked on that offensive line. They got someone behind Dalvin Cook. I really hope that they rely on Dalvin Cook. I still believe in that guy. A lot of times when you
it's not like they spent a first pick on him.
Right.
I mean,
a lot of times
Dalvin Cook's still the lead running back.
A lot of times when you turn your ALC, gosh, cannot talk. The repair is actually stronger than it was prior to that because they've just gotten so good at doing it. I really hope they come back and they rely on him heavy. I think he's a good player.
All right, let's move on, Drew. Let's do one more. Sorry if we didn't get to your team, but we'll talk about them on Wednesday, talking about the top end of the NFL.
Yeah.
I didn't expect this to go on for an hour, but here we are. Let's talk about my team. At number 17, a 2-spot dip, the Tennessee Titans. I think when you have any kind of insecurity like they do at the outside linebacker, at the pass rusher position in a 34, you can't sit there and say you're in a good spot. I mean, they brought in Cameron Wake, who, again, has been a good player in the NFL, but last year, he only played about 30% of the snaps for the Dolphins. He had 6.5 sacks. He's 37, Drew. when I was going into this, like, okay, our first pick needs to be an outside linebacker, and then maybe we need another one late in the draft. They really didn't address it as highly as I thought they would. They went for some value picks, guys like Simmons out of Mississippi State that they believe is going to be a great player. They went with A.J. Brown, who they thought they got a really good value at in the second round. Problem is, now you got to go into the year playing outside linebacker with Cameron Wake, who's going to play about 30% of the snaps, Demontrez Hurst, who we still don't know if he's that good, and Harold Landry, who, again, was the third option last year. The Titans, from the outside rusher position, are a big question mark. The defense was really good last year, even without those edge rushers doing a whole lot of work, but my question is, how long in the NFL can that hold up?
What's up, Sharif, man? Glad you could join us. I actually like the A.J. Brown move.
I do too. I like him as a player.
I'm not saying you did.
Right.
I actually really like that pick. I'm not a huge believer in Corey Davis as a number one receiver like other
I got a
people
signature
are.
on the bar, Drew. You have to believe in him.
That's who that was? I thought that was oh, okay. Hey, I thought it was a Chiefs cheerleader. But anyways,
Sharif, I hope Cameron Wake is a box player because we don't need to see him dropping it out of into
when
coverage
you draft
at all.
Jeffrey Simmons, you're drafting a player for the future, and there's no doubt about it. But when you sit there and look at the Titans and what they were 2 years ago, they were a playoff team. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs. This last year, they struggled a little bit, but they still had some great defensive play. So you're sitting there going, my defense is good enough for what I got right now that I'm willing to take 1 year away from my first pick out of the overall pick of your 2019 draft, where everyone's sitting there telling you there's all the talent you want defensively. It's okay to wait 1 year.
Yeah.
See, I don't think it is.
I think it is.
I don't think it is. I think it's okay to wait on.
Let's say
Simmons.
they get Nick Bosa. Let's say they get Josh Allen here in this pick. Are they winning the Super Bowl, Drew?
I think they have a better chance.
Okay, but are they winning the Super Bowl? No.
They-
So it's
they have a
okay to
better
wait,
chance.
and that's the whole point.
There's no team on here that you can sit there and tell me they're winning a Super Bowl.
Yeah, there's like 4 or 5 at the top. I'm saying they have a good chance of winning the Super Bowl, so don't question me on that. My point is with the Titans here, I still like the Simmons pick. I still like the A.J. Brown. I like every pick they made except maybe Nate Davis. Again, if that's the guy they believe in, that's
another
fine.
one. They picked on him. I mean, they picked him.
That was the only need pick I could sit there and say. They're like, we need a guard.
They went to
so let's
They
go
had
get
a
him.
private workout with him. They brought him into Nashville. They went to his pro day. They went to games. I mean, they were definitely targeting him. But do you see him as a day one starter again? So you're talking about your.
Well, that's my question. I don't know.
You're
I don't
talking
know
about
enough
your
about Nate Davis to tell you
two
the
out of
truth.
your
Whether
top
he's going to
three
be an
picks.
elite guy in the NFL. He's one of those guys. Well, that's the third pick.
3 or 2 out of your top 3 picks
He'll be available day one if that's what you're asking. Do I think he
might
can start?
not be the starter.
Do I think he can start? I think it's between him and Kevin Panfile, and I think it's absolutely a possibility he winds up being the starter from day one. Do I think he's going to be? He's not a slam dunk, Drew, but how many slam dunks come out of the third round? Especially offensive linemen. There's not many.
There's a lot.
No, there's not.
I
Let's
don't
talk
have them all in front of
about
me.
the rest of the Titans here, why they moved down. I do like Adam Humphries coming in.
I do
I
too.
think this is a good addition for them. They got better at wide receiver with him and A.J. Brown being part of this receiving room. But it's edge rusher, man. Again, how many teams could sit there and play well without any kind of plan at defensive end? I like Harold Landry from last year, but Harold Landry had 5.5 sacks or 6 sacks, I believe. You can't sit there and tell me he's going to be a 10.5, 11, 12 sacks. My question is, if something happens to Jarrell Casey, what happens to the rest of this defense? Because without him, they were pretty sorry against Indianapolis. Right now, they're a one-player front seven, at least when it comes to pass rush. Without him, again, Jeffrey Simmons may eventually be that guy. It's probably not going to be in 2019. That's why I sit there and say some of these other teams have had better off seasons than the Titans, even though I like every move they've made, for the most part.
Andrew says the Titans will finish second in the division, and you know what? With that, I absolutely like their free agency move with Ryan Tannehill. I like the trade for Ryan Tannehill. I think that's the right move. I think you need to get someone in there that's going to compete with Marcus Mariota. That's
And
actually,
play for the 8 games he's injured.
that's actually a true starter in the NFL. I think it was good. They know they're still saying Mariota's a starter. I think they're doing that to save face. But I think when it comes down to
I think it's just what you have to say, but I think it's
To save
it's
face.
open. Right. I think it's just what you have to say.
when
You have to
go
save
into-
the guy's
when you go-
ego
when
and
you
say
go
you're
into
still a
training
starter.
camp, when you go into preseason stuff, that's when you're going to really see what they're planning on doing.
Right. And Sharif also said the Ravens defense did sack Mariota 11 times. Yeah, well, Zadarius Smith's gone now, buddy. Who's sacking him for the Ravens these days? Also, going back to that fact, I agree with you, and I think the Titans kind of tried to address those needs. I think their biggest issues were the interior line. So they got rid of Quentin Spain, they got rid of Josh Klein, got rid of those guards, brought in Roger Saffold, who was really good for the Rams last year, and then they drafted a guy to replace Josh Klein on the right side, more than likely. They've kind of made adjustments to that, so hopefully that's an improvement. I mean, I'm not going to say it is right away, but when you're talking about giving up 11 sacks in a single game, you can roll the dice at that point, right? You're not losing much.
All right.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, make sure you subscribe to our page here and throw us a like if you don't mind.
Guys, remember this is sports around the bar, so grab one of your favorite drinks, join one of the fastest growing communities on YouTube. We can't wait to hear from you.